Hola amigos, ¿qué tal? Stuart here from Spain Speaks with the Spain News Update. Today we're going to have a look at what the international press is saying about Spain instead of the local press for a change. So we'll go into the different international news outlets and check out what they are saying about Spain today. So let's get straight into it. So straight into the Google search, and as we can see, the first story that pops up here is protests over mass tourism could spread beyond Spain, says UNESCO official. So we'll click on that one and see what it's all about. The Guardian wants me to pay, but I'm not going to do that today. And here we can see the article, situation out of balance as local people are priced out of housing and frustrated by hordes of selfie seekers. And let's be honest, that is true. Many people only taking holidays nowadays with the sole purpose of taking a selfie at an important tourist destination, and it's a shame. But anyway, let's see what this article's about. Surging visitor numbers, soaring housing prices, and the rise of selfie-seeking tourists have helped to create situations that are totally out of balance, a UNESCO official has said, adding that a failure to address these issues could see the Spanish wave of protests against mass tourism extend across Europe. In recent weeks, tens of thousands of protesters have taken to the streets in Spain's most popular destinations, calling for curbs on mass tourism and a rethink of the business model that they say has pushed up housing prices and driven local people out of cities. From Malaga to Mallorca and Gran Canaria to Granada, organisers have stressed that the protests are not against tourism per se, but rather a call for a more balanced approach. So it makes sense, a call for a more balanced approach, something that unfortunately seems to be lacking nowadays with the quality of politicians that we have, not only in Spain, but around the world it seems. And interesting to see that a lot of these protesters are stressing that their gripe is not against the tourist per se, but against the model. And I think that's generally true given all of the protests that have been taking place in Spain over the last few months. We've only seen a couple of incidents where tourists were attacked, in Barcelona of course by water pistols, and all of the anti-tourism graffiti that has popped up around the place. We saw a couple of weeks ago the worst of this graffiti with slogans saying kill a tourist, but that is only a small minority in my opinion that is putting this radical anti-tourism graffiti up, and they obviously are politically motivated by some of these independents or separatist groups that exist in Spain, especially in places like Catalonia and the Balearic Islands. But in other parts of the country, for example, the Valencian community, Andalusia or the Canary Islands, yes, there have been protests, but they haven't been overly aggressive against tourists, which is important. Now back into the search, and we can see the other articles that are dominating the international press about Spain. Carles Puigdemont's name pops up a few times. Another one here from the Telegraph, why Spain's little-known coast of death is the perfect beach destination. So promoting other parts of Spain that are not necessarily overrun with tourism. The Costa de Morte, the coast of death, as we can see. More about Puigdemont here from CNN. Politico has another article about Puigdemont. We'll talk about him in a moment. And of course, ESPN talking about the victory yesterday that Spain had over France to win that gold medal in the Paris Olympics. A big victory there, 5-3, 8 goals scored in that final. A huge game for Spain, and Spain dominating football at basically every level in the world at the moment. So good on Spain for that. More news here about the Spain-France game, more news about Puigdemont, and another article here from The Guardian about a spot in the north of Spain, another spot in the north of Spain, which doesn't have that over-tourism sensation called Luarca in Asturias. We won't look at that. I'll go on to the second page, and there was another article in The Guardian that I saw. I'll see if I can find it about Puigdemont because I want to talk about that now. And here it is. Carles Puigdemont's escape antics may look comic, but here's Spain's version of Donald Trump. That caught my attention yesterday. Let's click and see. The former Catalan president staged a dramatic flight from Barcelona, but his charade could fuel extremism in the region and beyond. And that is a worry, according to this writer in The Guardian, Maria Ramirez. So let's see what else she has to say. An egotistical and polarizing right-wing election loser addresses his adoring supporters in a speech, casting himself as a victim and questioning democracy just hours before Parliament is set to vote for the formal investiture of the actual winner. The crowd hold aloft pictures of the loser's face, chanting that he is their rightful president, and then turn their anger on the media, harassing reporters who are covering the event. Chaos ensues, and some of the leader's supporters attempt to assault the Parliament building. Sound familiar? Carles Puigdemont, the fugitive former president of Catalonia and the leader of the Catalan separatist party Junts, who fled Spain to avoid prosecution after organising an unlawful independence referendum in 2017, staged a dramatic reappearance on a Barcelona stage on Thursday. His show ended up being more of a charade than a coup, but it had definite Trumpian vibes. The loyal supporters he addressed were a small group and posed no serious threat to the Catalan parliament, but Puigdemont once again demonstrated his unwillingness to accept electoral defeat, his belief that he is above the law, and his self-centered need for the spotlight. And that is the story that has been dominating the press not only in Spain but also internationally, as we just saw there. And an interesting take on this whole affair and comparing Mr. Puigdemont with Donald Trump. Obviously, Puigdemont is not on the same scale as Donald Trump, doesn't have the same amount of supporters. Obviously, Catalonia not as big as the United States, but what he did last Thursday, very similar to what Trump has done in the past, which is basically refusing to accept electoral results and not respecting democracy and putting on ridiculous shows and saying ridiculous things that only his supporters believe, because nobody else in Spain or anywhere else cares for what Mr. Puigdemont says. The majority of people want to see him behind bars. And why that didn't happen the other day, nobody seems to know. Why wasn't he arrested in Barcelona? He spent a few days there. Everybody seemed to know that he was in Barcelona, but nobody arrested him. So very, very strange, and let's hope that Mr. Puigdemont takes up permanent residency in Belgium and never comes back to Spain. Now back into the search, and there's one final article that has caught my attention from Business Insider. I'm a boomer who couldn't afford to retire in the US. At 70, I moved to Spain and it was the best decision ever. So let's click on that one and we can see a picture of the author of this article. So let's find out her story. I filed for bankruptcy at 63. All I had were my pensions. I got a job teaching English where I met people from all over the world. I visited Spain and realized I could afford to retire there, so I moved in 2017. Sounds interesting, the story. Let's check it out. At the age of 63, I was bankrupt and in foreclosure. I had less than nothing because I owed money to a friend. All I had were my pensions. I knew I could never afford to retire in the US. I felt like it wasn't my fault. I'd worked in Hollywood as an assistant director for 20 years. Then I moved to Santa Fe, New Mexico, where I planned to grow my nest egg by investing in rental properties while selling real estate. That worked until the housing market crashed of 2008. My properties went underwater to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars. My income from real estate sales had dried up completely. My brokerage went out of business. I took my Social Security pension early. Another pension from my work in Hollywood would kick in at 65. She goes on to talk about how she started teaching English and met lots of interesting people from different countries. Then talks about how during the cold winters in Santa Fe, she would visit some other places in South and Central America. And then here she says, I assumed that Europe would not be affordable, but in 2016, one of my former students invited me to visit him in Madrid. Alberto was a fine arts professor. He guided me through museums packed with Goya, El Greco, and Picasso. He led me through diverse neighborhoods, elegant parks, and grand boulevards. Alberto took me to Sevilla. I traveled to Granada, Córdoba, Cádiz, and Barcelona. Each one seduced me. I had been dead wrong about Spain's cost of living. It was cheaper than some of the South American countries. It fit my budget and then some. Even better, it had first world infrastructure and such excellent public transportation that I wouldn't need a car. And as a result of all those things, she packed up her gear in the States and moved to Spain permanently, where she enjoys a very good quality of life. And let's be honest, lots of people are thinking about doing the same thing because the cost of living in places like Australia, the States, as we saw there, Canada, out of control, and Spain, let's be honest, is a cheaper country when it comes to cost of living. And not only Spain, here in Portugal, many people from the United States have moved to Portugal looking for that higher quality of life and better bang for their buck. So an interesting story there of a US retiree who has moved to Spain. On that note, I'm going to wrap the video up. Questions and comments, please leave them in the section below. If you have anything to add to the conversation today, the comment section is the place for you. Give the video a thumbs up if you liked it, thumbs down if you didn't. I'll see you in the next one. Hasta luego.